Hello everybody and welcome to a new lecture. In this video I would like to talk about support and resistance because it is a very important aspect in trading. When you hear these terms, support and resistance, you will want to think about levels where people want to enter or to exit a position. What we should understand when we talk about support levels is that it is a zone where the price tends to find support from the buyers as it falls. This means that the price is more likely to bounce upwards of this area rather than break through it. However, once the price has breached this level to the downside with high volume and conviction, we would assume that it is more likely to continue falling until meeting the next support level. Okay? So the resistance is the opposite of the support level, and it is where the price tends to find resistance from the sellers as it rises. This means that the price is more likely to bounce to the downside of this zone rather than break through it. However, once the price has breached this level with high volume, we would assume that it is more likely to continue rising until meeting the next area of resistance. So let's take over some examples now. And what I want to show you now is how to spot resistance and supports when you look at the chart. Okay? So if we look up here, we can see that are a lot of wicks rejecting from the upside in this area. What we want to do is to consider this highest point over here where the market starts to downtrend, as you can see right here, and we will assume that this is a resistance level right here, and I'm going to highlight it like this, and I will annotate it right here so you can see. Okay? And now, because you can clearly see we had a big bounce to the upside from this area, now we will assume that this is the support right here, and I will annotate as well that this is the support zone. Now that we have a clear view on the chart where support and resistance are, we can clearly see that we bounced from this support level with high volume, and we start an uptrend as you can see right here. Now, because we met the resistance, we have two options. The first options that we have is to break it to the upside, but for that it is necessary a lot of conviction and volume, which we don't have in this particular case, as you can see right here. And the second option is to start a downtrend because we don't have the strength to break it, as you can see in these huge rejections from these two particular candles right here. And from the volume indicator, we can clearly see that the volume is diminishing, so that implies that the market starts to lose steam. Okay? Here we have a second attempt to break this resistance, but as you can see, we have a huge rejection from the upside as well. We see on the volume that it is even lower than it was before when we tried to break this resistance. Because of this, what do you want to think that it will happen next? We start to downtrend, and where do you think that it is more likely to bounce again to be a trend reversal? Right over here, where was the previous support region, and if we extend this box where previous support was found, we can clearly see that this is where people expect a bounce, and here is the zone where they want to place their buy orders, and as you can see, this support area has held very nice for us to enter a trade right here. In this particular example, I wanted to show you how the market plays when we can't break a resistance. In the next example, I want to show you what happens when the market manages to break through the resistance to the upside and continues to rise until meeting the next resistance. Okay? For this example, we will use this resistance right here. And in this case, we managed to break through this resistance because we have the volume necessary to sustain an uptrend. As you can see, because we break this resistance, we continue to uptrend to the next area where we find resistance, and as you can clearly see, it is in the same area as the previous swing high over here. Also, because this resistance was broken to the upside, now this area over here now becomes a support zone, because what we used to be a resistance, if we break it to the upside, now becomes support, and because we couldn't break the next resistance zone over here, people will want to place their buy orders at this support zone. And as you can see, it held very nice, and we start to test again this big resistance right here. In the next example, what I want to show you is another way to draw your resistance and support using trend lines, because they also gives us a strong indication of where we can find resistance and support based on candlestick formations. In this case, we are going to use this drawing tool called trend line, and when we draw our trend line, it is very important to connect at least 3 points to be considered valid, and we are going to do it like this. As you can see, we have at least 3 connections on this trend line. Here is the first connection. Here is the second connection. Here you can see we have our third connection. And on our fourth connection, we managed successfully to break out of this strong resistance right here. As well as in the previous example, when we break a resistance, now becomes a support, and right here, because we managed to break out of it with high volume and conviction, this strong resistance from up here now becomes a very strong support area. In the next example, I drew my support trend line over here, and as you can see, we have at least 3 connections here as well, with a lot of rejections from the downside, and that implies that the bulls are defending against the bears, and we start to make higher lows with a lot of wicks rejecting from the downside. If this support trend line had been broken to the downside with high volume and conviction, it would become a resistance, because we couldn't maintain that momentum of making higher lows and continue to uptrend. But in this case, it managed to hold to an immense pressure from the bears, and we ended up going upwards from this zone. Another way to find support and resistance is to look at the RSI. You have to double click on it to have a clear view, and here as well we can draw our trend lines of support and resistance. These RSI indicators allows us to identify the strength in the market, and in this example I want to show you when the market starts to lose or gain strength by drawing our trend lines. We take our trend line tool and we take this high point over here and we drag it to the next one right here. And what we can see from this trend line is that we make lower highs, and that implies that the market starts to lose strength, and that might be a trend reversal. The same rule applies as well when we draw our support line like this, and what we can see is that we start to make higher lows, and that implies that the market starts to gain strength, and this might be a trend reversal as well. So thank you for being here with me in this lecture, and I will see you in the next one.